This happened a few weeks ago. I moved into a duplex, hoping to find a sense of community. The charm of brick buildings got me. It felt right. I thought I'd make friends soon. But then things got strange. On my second night, I was in bed. I heard scratching noises from the wall. At first, I thought it was the building settling. But then it turned into rhythmic knocks. I felt a chill creep down my spine. I told myself it was just the house. Still, my gut told me those walls were whispering. The next day, I saw my neighbor. He was an old man, standing by his window. He didn't move. He just stared outside with a blank look. It made me uneasy. Was he lonely? I didn't know. A few days later, the knocking got louder, echoing in my chest. I thought about knocking back. What would I say? It was just old walls, right? Then I heard the soft cries. Late at night, I could hear muted sobs through the wall. It was faint but heavy. It weighed on me. I got up to check, but each time I peeked out, the hallway was empty. I felt silly. I whispered to myself, "It's all in your head." Despite that, I watched my neighbor more closely. He still stood at the window, staring and waiting. Maybe he was lost in memories. Maybe we were both trapped in our pasts. One night, the knocking turned violent. It was like the wall wanted to break through. My heart raced. I felt frozen. Then I heard that muffled cry again, louder this time. I thought I might scream. I tiptoed to the wall, pressing my ear against it. "Hello?" I called softly. No answer. Was I going crazy? Then, I heard a voice, faint but clear. "Help me," it pleaded, sending shivers down my spine. I took a deep breath and hovered my hand over the wall, unsure what to do. Then I heard my neighbor's voice. "Why are you here?" he asked. I froze. I turned around, ready to confront my fear, but the hallway was dark and empty. I stood there, heart pounding. I felt my stomach drop. What did it all mean? I thought. What really lived next door? I wanted to know, but I didn't know how to find out. The next day, I felt an itch of anxiety. I decided to knock on my neighbor's door and confront my fear. As I walked to it, my hands trembled. I stood there, taking deep breaths. Finally, I knocked softly. Nothing happened. I waited, my stomach twisting. Was he in there? I wondered. I felt foolish for even coming here. I turned to leave when the door creaked open slightly. It was dark inside. "Why are you here?" The same voice asked, just like before. I jumped back, peering into the shadows. I couldn't see him. I just wanted to say hi," I stammered. The door swung shut, leaving me standing alone in the quiet. And just like that, I was left wondering again. What haunted my neighbor? What haunted me? I don't think I'll ever know. I spent the next few days feeling uneasy. The walls felt closer, more alive, as if they were watching me. I would sit in my living room, jumping at every creak and groan. My neighbor was still a mystery, and my curiosity burned brighter than my fear. I had to find out what was happening. Determined to break the silence, I went back to the door. This time, I didn't knock. Instead, I paced outside. I needed to see inside. I thought about peeking through the window, but I hesitated. My heart raced. As I stood there, I noticed something strange. The curtain in his living room was slightly parted. I moved closer and peered in. The room was dark and cluttered. Shadows danced, but something else caught my eye. There were frames on the wall, old photographs, faded and dusty. I squinted, trying to make out the faces. Suddenly, the curtain moved. I stumbled back, my breath hitching. I had been caught. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw him. The old man glared at me from the window, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and despair. I felt a chill creep over me. "Why are you spying on me?" he shouted, his voice breaking the silence like glass shattering. I stumbled back, caught off guard. "I wasn't trying to." I yelled back, panic rising. I wanted to know if you were okay." He stared at me for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, just as quickly, he turned away and disappeared into the shadows of the house. My heart sank. I stepped back from the door. What had I done? I turned to head back, the discomfort in my stomach growing heavier. I needed to get away from there. Just as I started to walk, I heard it again. The faint cries. I froze. It wasn't just the old man. There was something deeper in the walls, something begging for help. Every cry pierced through my thoughts. I had to know if it was the same voice I'd heard before. Taking a deep breath, I pressed my ear against the wall again. "Please," the voice echoed, softer this time but filled with deep sorrow. My heart thundered in my chest. I felt trapped, like I was standing at the edge of a dark chasm. I wanted to sink back, but a sudden urgency pulled me closer. "What do you want?" I whispered, feeling both foolish and desperate. Then came the knock again, this time accompanied by a low, pleading whisper. "Help me!" Panic washed over me. I pulled away from the wall, heart racing. I felt a whirlwind of emotions, confusion and fear taking root. I had to confront my neighbor. I couldn't ignore the cries anymore. But before I could move, the ground shifted slightly beneath my feet. I gasped as I saw something across from me, a flicker of movement inside my neighbor's living room. I strained to see more. That was when I caught a glimpse of it, a shadow moving in the corner, a figure standing there, watching me. And then everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer outside my neighbor's house. I was back in my living room, sprawled on the floor as if I'd fallen. The sound of my heart pounding was the only thing that broke the silence. "What just happened?" I muttered, shaking my head to clear the fog. The darkness outside had thickened, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. I sat up slowly, my legs feeling heavy. The cries from the wall were still echoing in my mind, haunting me. I was tempted to dismiss the experience I had just gotten startled. But there was a lingering dread that prevented me from shaking it off completely. I glanced at the wall that separated my home from the old man's. It looked just like any other wall, plain and ordinary. Yet, under the stark white paint, I could feel something dark and hidden. The cries had felt so real, so near, like they were coming from a place that I couldn't see. Still shaken, I stood up and walked to the window. I had to at least see if the man was still there. I pulled the curtain aside and peered outside. The street was quiet, and the light from my lamp cast a warm glow on the pavement. But my gaze flicked back to my neighbor's house. The curtains were drawn tight now, and I couldn't see anything. What if something was truly wrong? I felt a rush of adrenaline and turned away from the window. I needed to know more, to find out what lay behind that door. I recalled the shadow I had seen earlier. Maybe this was my chance to figure things out. I made my way back to his door. My breath hitching, I knocked gently, hesitating for a moment. "Hello? Is anyone there?" I called out, my voice quivering. Silence answered me. Just as I was about to leave, I heard a shuffle from within. My heart raced. He was there. Then the door creaked open a crack. I saw the old man's weary face peering out. His eyes looked haunted, and I felt a wave of sympathy wash over me. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm your neighbor, from next door," I said, pushing my fear aside. "I wanted to check on you. I heard noises." He opened the door just wide enough for me to see him properly. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, urgency creeping into his words. "It's not safe." "Not safe? What do you mean?" I pressed, crossing the threshold of my own caution. "Please, just go," he urged, a hint of desperation creeping into his voice. But just then, the cry returned, sharper and more insistent. I stepped back, stunned. "Is that you?" I asked, my stomach twisting. The old man's face went pale. "No. It's not me." His eyes darted past me, and I felt a chill slide down my spine. That's when I saw a figure looming in the shadows behind him, dark and slick, as if it was a part of the house itself. The cries grew louder. "Get out!" the old man screamed, shoving the door closed just as I turned to run. Panic surged through me as I stumbled back onto the porch. I couldn't escape the feeling that I was trapped in something far beyond my understanding. The wall seemed to swell around me, and I felt the shadows reach out, hungry for me. I bolted back to my house, heart pounding, as the desperate cries echoed in my ears. I slammed the door shut and leaned against it, gasping for breath. Whatever was in that house was not just a mystery, it was a threat. I had no idea what lay ahead, but I sensed that I had just taken my first step into something that would change everything. The next morning, I woke up with a deep knot in my stomach. I didn't sleep well. The shadows from the old man's house haunted my dreams, twisting and turning into shapes that chased me through endless hallways. I rubbed my eyes and took a deep breath, willing myself to shake off the fear. I had to act. I decided to confront the situation head-on. Curiosity and dread twisted together, pulling me back toward that old door. I needed answers. What was that figure? What was happening to my neighbor? I grabbed my coat and stepped outside, feeling the crisp air bite my skin. The morning sun was bright, but it did little to dispel the gloom I felt. I walked cautiously toward the old man's house, skirting the edge of his yard, half expecting to hear those haunting cries again. When I reached the door, I hesitated. "This is crazy," I muttered to myself. But fear alone wasn't enough to stop me. I knocked again, louder this time. The seconds stretched on as I waited for a response. Just as I thought I would be met with silence again, the door creaked open slowly, revealing the old man, looking even more disheveled than the night before. "I told you to leave," he said sharply, glancing over his shoulder, as if he expected something to lunge at him from the shadows. "Please, I just want to help," I pleaded. "What is going on?" "There's something in your house." I saw it." His eyes widened, and he stepped back. "You shouldn't have looked," he whispered. "You didn't see what was in there. You don't understand." Before I could respond, a loud crash echoed from within the house, and I flinched. The old man's eyes flicked to the doorway, a mixture of panic and fear etched across his face. "What was that?" I asked, heart racing. "Nothing," he snapped, shaking his head. "You need to go before it sees you." "But I can't just leave you," I insisted. I was past the point of simply walking away. Whatever held him captive, I wouldn't turn my back now. Then another noise echoed, this time a low, guttural growl. It sent chills racing down my spine. The old man broke into a cold sweat. "It's coming. Please, go now." In that moment, I felt a surge of bravery or perhaps foolishness. "No, I'm staying." His eyes bore into mine, desperation clinging to every word. "You don't know what it wants. It feeds on fear. You have to understand, once you see it, once it knows you, it doesn't let you go." "What do you mean, it doesn't let you go?" My voice trembled, the seriousness of his words sinking in. But before he could respond, the door burst open wider. A shadowed figure loomed behind him, dark and twisted, and the growl grew louder. The old man tried to shove me away, but I stood frozen, entranced by the horror unfolding before me. Then everything went dark. I blinked, and in that blink, the old man was gone, as if he had never been there at all. I stumbled back, panic clawing at my throat. I turned to run, racing back into my house, but the cries were there, louder than before, echoing in my mind. The weight of the darkness pressed down on me, and I knew this was just the beginning. I stumbled into my living room, the door slamming behind me as if it could somehow shield me from what had just happened. My heart raced. Had the old man vanished into thin air? I shook my head, trying to clear the thoughts swirling around. I needed to think clearly. The cries still rang in my ears, each one a reminder of my failure to help him. I looked around my home, wondering if I could find some clue, something that would explain the nightmarish vision I had witnessed. The walls felt too close, like they were closing in on me. I reached for my phone, my hands trembling as I tried to call for help. But the words caught in my throat. Who could I call? The police wouldn't believe me. They'd think I was insane for not just walking away. My mind raced, thinking about how to handle this on my own. Then, an idea struck me, maybe I could return to the old man's house. Perhaps there was something there, a clue, a trace of what had happened. I didn't want to go back, but I felt an unstoppable pull toward the door where I'd faced the unknown. I made my way outside again, the air thick with unease. Each step toward the old man's home felt like an eternity. My breath caught in my throat as I approached. The house loomed before me, dark and forbidding. But I couldn't turn back. The door was slightly ajar. It looked like someone had been in a hurry to leave. I pushed it open, heart pounding in my chest. The interior was silent, but the air was thick with a strange, acrid smell, like burnt metal. "Hello?" I called out tentatively. No reply. The shadows within seemed to shift, drawing me further inside against my better judgment. I stepped carefully, avoiding broken furniture and scattered debris. It felt as though I was intruding into a sacred space burdened by dread. As I moved deeper into the house, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I fished it out, expecting a call or a message. Instead, my heart sank. It was the old man's number. I stared at it, hands shaking. Should I answer? With a deep breath, I pressed accept. A hollow silence filled the air, and I almost hung up, but then I heard his voice, distorted and crackling. "You shouldn't have come back." I froze, the words slicing through the tightness in my chest. "What do you mean? Where are you?" "I'm trying to warn you. It doesn't like intruders. You must leave." A sudden crash resonated from upstairs, dropping my phone from my hand. I felt the ground shift beneath me as if the house itself was alive, angry about my presence. Panic gripped my heart, and I knew I was no longer safe. But before I could retreat, I heard another voice, an alien whisper, dripping with malice, echoing from somewhere above. "Stay, we want you to stay." My feet began to move involuntarily, pulling me toward the staircase that spiraled up into darkness. I struggled against the force drawing me in, but it was futile. My heart thundered, and I found myself stepping forward, unable to resist the horrific invitation. That's when I felt an icy breath brush against my neck, and the whispers intensified, wrapping around me like a predator closing in on its prey. I knew I had to act fast, but the darkness consumed everything. I took a shaky breath, willing myself to turn back. My instincts screamed at me to flee, but my feet moved of their own accord. The shadows swirled around me, bending the light in strange ways. I blinked rapidly, trying to clear my vision. A sense of dread filled the air, thick and suffocating. With each step up the staircase, that voice echoed louder, urging me to stay. I gritted my teeth and pressed on, refusing to succumb to its draw. As I reached the top, a cold wind swept through the hallway, chilling me to the bone. The door to the room at the end was slightly ajar, a thin line of darkness beckoning me forward. I pushed the door open, only to be greeted by an eerie sight. The room was bare except for a dust-covered antique mirror standing against the wall. My gaze fixed on it. I felt as though it was waiting for me, its dark surface whispering secrets that I shouldn't hear. Carefully, I approached, peering into the glass. Just my reflection stared back at me. Yet, as I leaned closer, the image began to warp. The corners of the mirror flickered, and for a split second, I saw the old man standing behind me, his face twisted in distress. Then, just as quickly, the reflection returned to normal. I gulped, backing away. What was happening? I nearly screamed when I caught another movement. This time, a shadow flitted across the hallway behind me. I turned my head, but nothing was there. My heart raced as I stood frozen, the air thick with that acrid scent once again. Suddenly, the whisper returned, louder and more insistent. "Join us, you're meant to stay." I shook my head, desperation clawing at my throat. "No. I don't want to stay." A cold laugh echoed in response, chilling me more than the wind. I bolted from that room, instinct driving me as I raced back down the stairs. My mind spun wildly. The thoughts of the old man, the whispers, the distorted reflections collided in chaos. Just as I reached the front door, I felt a tug on my shirt, a grip that froze my feet in place. Terror clawed at my insides. I turned slowly, and that's when I saw it, a flash of pale hands emerging from the shadows, grasping toward me. "Help us," the voices pleaded, now unified. "We cannot escape." Panic surged through me, and I tugged against the grip, fighting with everything I had. It felt like something deep and restless was holding me, anchoring me to this cursed place. My heart pounded louder than the whispers as I wrestled against the unseen force. Then everything went dark. The world faded from view, and I was swallowed whole by the abyss, the chaos of voices drowning out my screams. I had no idea what awaited me beyond the shadows, but I knew one thing: I was no longer in control. I gasped for air, my lungs burning as I fought to resurface from the darkness. Light flooded my vision, sharp and blinding. I had no idea how long I had been gone. I blinked rapidly, struggling to make sense of my surroundings. I was laying on the cold floor of the hallway near the front door. The unsettling stillness was broken only by the distant creaking of the house. Hesitantly, I pushed myself up, glancing around. Had that been a dream? I couldn't tell. My heart was racing, that familiar dread still coiling tightly around me. I needed to leave. Trying to keep my panic at bay, I stumbled to my feet, my eyes darting toward the door as if it was my only hope. But as I approached, I noticed the shadows in the corners flickered ominously. The whispers were gone, but I could still feel their weight, like an echo that wouldn't fade. I reached for the doorknob, my hands trembling, but a sense of impending doom made me pause. Something wasn't right. Just then, I heard it again, a faint knocking sound. It came from the back of the house. My mind screamed for me to ignore it, but curiosity urged me on. Slowly, I turned and made my way toward the sound. As I approached the kitchen, which felt even colder than the hallway, I hesitated at the threshold. I could see the back door slightly ajar. The knocking was definitely coming from outside. I took a cautious step forward, bracing myself. What if it was someone from the neighborhood, or worse, what if it was something else? I pushed the door wider and peered out into the yard. The moon bathed everything in silver light, casting long shadows that seemed to reach for me. There was nothing there. My heart sank, and I took a step back when I saw movement in my peripheral vision. And that's when I saw it. At the edge of the trees, just outside the yard, was a figure. A tall man stood there, silhouetted against the moonlight. He was watching me, unmoving. I could just make out his features, graying hair, a long coat fluttering in the night breeze. I felt an icy chill run down my spine as his gaze locked onto mine. "Who are you?" I called out, my voice trembling. He didn't respond at first. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he pointed at the house, his finger trembling as if he were making some urgent plea. "Come," he said in a low whisper that seemed to float on the wind. "You must come." Panic surged through me again. I staggered back, my instinct screaming to run. But deep down, a part of me felt tethered to him, curious about his urgent summons. The memory of the voices and the old man's reflection surged in my mind, warning me that I should not trust. Then, without warning, the trees behind him rustled violently, shadows dancing erratically in the moonlight. My breath hitched as I turned my back on him, sprinting back inside and slamming the door shut. I leaned against it, pressing my back to the wood, heart racing. What had I just seen? And who was that man? The shadows in the house felt more alive than ever, swirling and wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. I glanced out the window, but he was gone. Now I was left with more than just fear. I felt a growing sense of urgency. I had to uncover the truth behind the whispers, the figures haunting me, and what they wanted from me. And as I turned away from the door, ready to dive deeper into this nightmare, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was happening was just beginning. The smell of damp wood filled my nostrils as I stood in the kitchen, still reeling from what I had just seen. I couldn't shake that man's piercing gaze from my mind. Desperate to ground myself in reality, I grabbed my phone from the counter to check for messages or missed calls. Nothing. No alerts, no notifications, just silence. I couldn't stay here. I needed to confide in someone, anyone. My neighbor, Mrs. Calloway, was friendly enough. I had seen her walking her dog earlier in the day. If anyone had a grasp on this place, on the strange happenings, it would be her. Clutching my phone like a lifeline, I forced myself to step out of the kitchen. The house seemed to hold its breath as I walked through the living room. The ticking clock felt deafening, its sound matching the pounding of my heart. I was thankful when I reached the front door, but a sudden thought stopped me in my tracks. What if the man had come to find me? What if I wasn't alone? Summoning every ounce of courage, I flung the door open, stepping outside into the night. The air was cool, a sharp contrast to the heaviness inside. I scanned the yard, half expecting the figure to reappear, but nothing moved. The only sounds were the rustle of leaves and the distant call of a night owl. I made my way across the lawn, towards Mrs. Calloway's house. As I moved closer, I noticed her porch light flickering. The constant dimming felt like a warning, but I pushed through the doubt and kept going. Her front door stood ajar. "Mrs. Calloway?" I called out hesitantly. There was no answer. I stepped up onto the porch, feeling an inexplicable sensation that something was off. I peeked into the dark living room, but it was empty. Strange for such a late hour. The flicker of her porch light drew my attention again. I glanced down the street nervously. Shadows seemed to creep along the edges of the road. Closing my eyes for a moment, I took a shaky breath and stepped inside, the door creaking as it swung open. "Hello?" I called again, hoping for a reply. Still silence. I moved deeper into the house, feeling like an intruder in a place meant to feel safe. As I reached the kitchen, I noticed something that made my heart jump. A small radio on the counter was tuned to static, seemingly left on in a hurry. Just as I turned to leave, a loud thud echoed from the back of the house. My stomach dropped. Someone was in the house, and it wasn't me. "Mrs. Calloway?" I tried again, but I knew her voice wouldn't come in response. Without thinking, I rushed back toward the noise, walking slowly on the tip of my toes. Each step felt heavy with dread. The thud came again, louder this time, like something being dropped. My mind raced, wondering if I was walking toward help or into a trap. Then, just as I reached the hallway, I caught something in the corner of my eye. The back door swung open wider than I had left it, and the chilling night air whipped past me. Shadows curled and danced around the frame, whispering secrets that sent shivers down my spine. I wasn't alone. The air crackled with tension as the flicker from the porch light dimmed again. I could feel it, something had entered the house. And the last thing I wanted was for my fate to intertwine with whatever had come in through that door. I stood frozen, heart racing, as a tense silence filled the hallway. The whimper of the wind outside seemed to seep into the house, mixing with the static from the radio. Gripping the edge of the counter, I felt the weight of dread settle over me like a thick cloak. Every instinct screamed for me to run, but I couldn't move. Another thud echoed from the back of the house, this time closer, sharper. My breath hitched. I strained my ears, trying to pick up any sound that would reveal what was happening. The shadows at the door shifted again. Had someone stepped inside? If they had, I needed to know before I made any rash decisions. As quiet as possible, I tiptoed down the hallway toward the source of the noise. The farther I ventured, the more I felt a pull toward whatever was lurking in the darkness. Maybe it was my curiosity or the desperate need to feel less alone in this uncanny moment. I wasn't quite sure. The hallway opened into the dining room, where the sight before me felt like a surreal nightmare. The back door was wide open, the screen door swinging slightly as if beckoning me to just step outside. Right past it, on the floor, was Mrs. Calloway's purse. My heart sank. It lay there, completely unguarded, but I found myself more afraid than reassured. I stepped closer, eyeing the purse. Nothing seemed out of place until I caught sight of the floor tiles. Smudged footprints led from the door into the darkened hallway beyond. I should have turned back then, it was a clear sign to leave. But an unshakable curiosity compelled me to follow them, and I couldn't help but wonder what I might find. With each careful step, the world around me felt distorted, an eerie stillness blanketing everything. I could hear only my heartbeat, each pulse a reminder of the risk I was taking. The footprints disappeared into the kitchen. I paused, my heart racing as I scanned the space. No sign of anyone. But the air felt thick with unspoken tension, heavy with what I couldn't see. Just then, I heard it, a whispered murmur, too soft to comprehend but undeniably close. It brought a chill to my spine, and I realized I wasn't alone. I took a shaky breath, pushed through the threshold into the kitchen, and let my eyes search for any movement. In the corner, next to the back door, stood a shadowy figure. My vision narrowed, and my thoughts spiraled. Who was this person? Why were they here? I opened my mouth, intending to demand answers, but before I could speak, the figure turned towards me. An icy wave of recognition swept through me. It was Mrs. Calloway, but her expression was hollow, as if she weren't fully present. Her eyes reflected something unsettling, like a deep fear woven with confusion. In that moment, everything shattered. "Help me," she whispered, her voice trembling, "it's coming." I barely understood her plea when suddenly the back door slammed shut. The sound rang through the house like a death knell, plunging me into a new realm of panic. The air around us shifted, heavy with an unseen presence. Simultaneously, the static from the radio erupted into a loud, crackling noise, drowning out my thoughts. I backed away instinctively, my pulse pounding in my ears. Then, that's when I saw it. A faint flicker of movement behind Mrs. Calloway, dark and swirling, creeping closer. I could feel terror rise in my throat. I had come looking for answers, but now it seemed I had only found a deeper mystery and an imminent danger. "Run!" I screamed, but it was already too late. I bolted from the kitchen, gasping for breath as I raced through the hallway, my mind spinning. I could hear Mrs. Calloway's faint cries, echoing behind me as I flung myself onto the porch. The chilly night air cut through me, stinging my skin. I turned to look back inside, the door swinging wildly from my hurried escape. "Help us!" she screamed, her voice tinged with desperation. My heart felt like it was going to burst. Whatever was in that house, it felt undeniably real, the shadows, the whispers, the ominous presence that hung over everything. Glancing around, I spotted Mr. Wilson, an older gentleman from across the street, walking his dog. I screamed for help, waving my arms frantically. "Over here. Please, help." But he merely squinted into the darkness, confusion clouding his eyes. Then he turned, muttering something I couldn't quite hear, as if he didn't want to get involved. Fear washed over me, turning my blood cold. How could I help her? I didn't know what I was walking into, but I couldn't abandon her. I dove back through the door, steeling myself. This time, I would face the dark. The static from the radio was a haunting backdrop as I crept down the hallway. I felt the shadows pressing in on me, wrapping around my limbs like icy tendrils. I stumbled into the dining room. The back door still stood wide open, and the unsettling sense of emptiness flooded in. "Mrs. Calloway." I called out again, desperation clawing at my throat. Suddenly, I heard the low growl again, a sound that chilled me to the bone. It emanated from the kitchen where I had seen her last. I hesitated. Should I turn back? But the fear of leaving her outweighed my dread, and somehow, I knew I wouldn't find peace until I knew the truth. I turned cautiously towards the kitchen, my footsteps silent against the cold tile. The moment I stepped inside, the temperature dropped even more, sending shivers down my spine. There she stood, her back to me, the dim light casting eerie shapes around her. I instinctively whispered her name, "Mrs. Calloway." She turned slowly, but there was something off about her. Where once I had seen warmth in her eyes, now there was only a shadow, a deep hollowness that sent chills through me. "You shouldn't have come back," she replied with an odd serenity. "It will know you." I shook my head in disbelief, searching for some hint of the woman I had spoken to before, but all I saw was an empty shell. Then, from the other side of the room, dark shapes twisted and coiled, figures writhing as if trying to make their way into reality. The dark entity I had felt earlier was here, lurking, hungry. "No," I pleaded, taking a step back, "this isn't real." But before I could process what was happening, the room vibrated with noise. The whispers erupted, a cacophony of voices pleading, echoing, crashing over me. "Help us. Don't leave us." A sudden force surged through the air. I felt as if I were being pulled toward the kitchen table as darkness encapsulated me. My legs refused to move as I stood rooted in place, grasping for air. Just then, Mrs. Calloway lunged forward. "You have to," but before she could finish, the shadows erupted, swarming us. It wrapped itself around her, and in a blink, she was pulled into the void, swallowed whole by the very darkness that had haunted me. I couldn't scream. I could only run. Heart pounding, I dived for the back door, narrowly escaping as the shadows clawed at my heels. As I burst outside, the cool air hit me like a splash of cold water, bringing a brief moment of clarity. But it didn't last. I turned back just in time to see the door slam shut with a deafening finality. The cacophony of whispers ceased, leaving only silence behind. The pale light of the moon bathed the backyard in an eerie glow. I stood there, gasping, trying to make sense of it all. Did I just lose my neighbor to whatever darkness had claimed her? I took one last look at her house, dread settling in my chest. What had I just witnessed? With no answers, only questions, I turned away and stumbled back toward my own home, shaken to the core. It was all too surreal, the echoes of the whispers still alive in my mind. I didn't stop to think about where I would go, only that I had to escape this place, this cycle of fear. I hurried inside, the weight of shadows following me. I didn't know if I'd ever be able to put it behind me. The community I'd sought had turned into a prison woven with darkness, and the haunting cries of the lost would forever remain with me, a chilling reminder of what resided on the other side of those walls. As the door clicked shut, I leaned against it and exhaled deeply. I had escaped, but at what cost? I still think about Mrs. Calloway sometimes, her hollow eyes and whispered warnings echoing in my thoughts. The echoes linger like unfinished stories waiting to be told. Would I ever know the truth? Would it follow me even in the light? I moved to a different city a week later. I never looked back. But sometimes, late at night, when the silence drops heavy, I can hear them again, the whispers beckoning from the dark.